Hi, this is Holly from Holly's Pandorium. I'm so glad you're back. I have with me today a special guest from Utah that I have not spoken with before. This is Tom Bennett, and he is part of a Bigfoot group in Utah. And so I am very excited to hear what's going on in Utah. Welcome, Tom. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I have not spoken with anyone doing Bigfoot research in the Utah area, so I am very interested to hear what's your normal, and I want to hear about characteristics of Bigfoot in your area and all that good stuff. But before we dive into that, I would very much love to hear a paranormal story that you can share that's personal to you that affected you in some way.
Sure. Well, I've had experiences of a variety of types. I've experienced things Bigfoot related. Also, lately, I've got a little bit of video of what it seems like a lot of people are calling plasmoids, those self-contained energy spheres that people are starting to see all around the United States. I've also had experiences with things of more spiritual nature. I live in a house that has paranormal activity on a pretty regular basis. We've got a running list of occurrences with them frequent as last night after about a month or two of inactivity. So I've experienced a lot of things that would be considered paranormal.
Wow, that's incredible. That's really incredible. So can you talk a little bit about when you first decided that the paranormal might be real to you?
Yes. I remember I grew up on a farm on the Georgia-Alabama state line, and it was in a extremely rural area. And I remember even as a child playing alone in the woods, feeling the presence of something unidentifiable. I don't recall seeing spirits or anything like that, but we knew that the area that I lived in was Native American land, and there was a lot of arrowheads and mounds and other places relative to Native American culture through a wide period of time, going back to the ancient days up until a pretty modern time. And so I developed an interest pretty young. And of course, I'm 44, so I grew up in the era of the X-Files, and I
Right.
used to sneak up and watch that. And
Yeah.
I'd get pretty scared. My mom would send me downstairs, but I would sneak onto the stairs and watch.
Right.
So I got into it back then. But as far as personal experiences, I really got into the Bigfoot phenomenon. As a child, I thought I saw one. I was looking out my window one time as a little kid, probably 8, 9 years old, and I thought I saw one out in the woods. And after that, I would look every morning, and it was always there after I noticed it. And I eventually got the courage to go out in the woods and see this Bigfoot. Now, I had noticed it never appeared to move, so I was thinking that was quite strange. But I remember going out in the woods and eventually getting the courage and slowly kind of stalking my way up to it. And I had my shotgun. I grew up in an area where it was not uncommon for even young kids to have a gun.
Sure.
And I got out there in the woods and I snuck up on this thing, and I got probably about 40 yards from it when I finally realized what it was. It was a pine tree that had snapped off in a storm, probably about 9 feet up, and moss had grown over it, making it into the shape of Bigfoot. It wasn't a Bigfoot at all, but it got me hooked on Bigfoot and all things Sasquatch related.
I bet. Well, just the possibility of what if. So can you say now as an adult that you feel confident that there's Bigfoot, or are you still in the I'm not sure category?
I think the evidence strongly supports the existence of Sasquatch. I have in my adult years, I've had my own experiences, and I've found evidence myself that I've had looked at by experts in the study, and they conclude that it's valid evidence. Um, my I've had two personal Bigfoot experiences, and I'll preface these by saying I believe I saw Bigfoot
Mhm,
because it would be hard for it to be anything else.
mhm.
However, I believe in evidence, and even though I got a decent look at what I saw two occasions, I was not close enough to make out the details of its face.
Okay.
Um, but what happened with me? The first experience I had. So I'm a country music singer. That's what I do for work.
Mhm,
And I was on my way up to a show in the Uinta Mountains of Utah, which are about three-quarters of the way up the state. And whereas most people think of Utah as more like the area I live in now, which is
mhm.
extreme southwest,
Okay.
it's very desert here. But up there in those mountains, it looks a lot like your background screen. It's
Yeah.
very
Okay.
alpine, very very rugged terrain. I mean, it is the Rocky Mountains. It's the Uinta section of the Rocky Mountains. And so I was going to play at a ski resort, and I'd been up there many times, both in summer, fall, spring. This was, I believe, my first time going up in the winter. And the route that I took to get there would have you cross uh, a part of the Weber River, which comes down out of the mountains into the city of Ogden, Utah.
Okay.
And generally in the spring, summer, and fall, this particular stretch of the Weber River that you can see from the highway is completely filled with trout fishermen. It's a
Okay.
very, very good trout fishing spot. But being that it was the dead of winter, and on this particular day, calling it a blizzard would be reasonable. It was snowing
Okay.
very, very, very hard.
Okay.
Um, there was no fishermen out there, but there was something out there. And
Okay.
what I saw was a being in the shape of a man, quite large, uniform in color from head to toe. It looked black. It was either a dark brown or a black.
Okay.
The man that I saw standing in the river was very tall. It would be difficult for me to estimate its height, being that I was on a bridge above it,
Oh,
but it
sure.
was much larger than men I'd seen.
Okay.
And what made it unique is it was standing in the river, and it had its legs braced like this to keep it
Okay.
from getting knocked over by the current. And
Okay.
this thing was looking down in the water like it was trying to fish with its hands, you
Right.
know? And I'm looking at it, and at first I just acknowledge its presence. And then I think, you know what? That's not a man. There's no men fishing
Right.
out here like there normally is. Who would be standing in the river in a blizzard? And I made
Right.
up my mind that as soon as I got over the bridge, which was right there, I was going to pull off the road and get out and run down there and get a closer look. And
Right.
that process took about a minute or so to get over this little bridge. I pulled off in the snow, opened my door, jumped out into waist deep snow, and I'm trudging over there fast as
Oh,
I can, which
right.
wasn't that fast. But I think I made it over there within about 2.5, 3 minutes from when I first saw it.
Okay.
And whatever it was now gone. But the opposite side of the river, the mountain was quite steep and
Okay.
covered in snow, and
Okay.
something had taken like 6 foot long strides up that mountain, and it was gone. Didn't see it again, but I could see the footprints and the disruption of the snow as it ran up that mountain.
What did you think seeing that much of a gap between steps? What was in your mind when you saw that?
Honestly, as soon as I saw the human shaped figure in the river, there was that initial thought there's a man in the river. But as
Mhm.
soon as I put together the circumstances of the blizzard, the extreme cold,
Right.
that it wasn't fishing season, I immediately thought it was probably a Sasquatch, probably a Bigfoot. And after
Okay.
seeing the track way up the mountain, it I thought there's no way anyone could run up that. I mean, it would take a very special athlete to run up that mountain and be gone already.
Well, and that's anyone that's ever watched professional athletes in the Olympics doing high jumps or sprinting, even the tallest runners, even the tallest athletes don't typically have a stride that far apart. That's a
No.
huge space.
Yeah,
That's
definitely not in
enormous.
wasted snow up a mountain.
Right, exactly. You're dealing with all kinds of elements there. Like you said, waist deep snow and an incline. Wow. I mean, what on earth would be able to do that? So did you feel pretty confident that this was just definitely could not be a person at this point?
Yeah. I actually there's an organization that is based here in Utah called Rocky Mountain Sasquatch Organization, the
Mhm.
RMSO. They're very active on the various platforms. And I went and made a video right away being like, this is where I am, this is what I saw, and I turned over my video to them and they put it on their YouTube and on their social media. And
Mhm.
that area it's not, sightings are not uncommon.
Right.
Utah gets a good number of sightings. We're not Washington, we're not Oregon, we're not California, but
Right.
we're up there. We're up there for sure. Um, Especially the Uinta Mountain Range where I was.
Okay.
Uh, there's a trout farm near there that gets a lot of sightings.
Okay.
And then all the way down from the Uintas into the Wasatch Range, which goes outside of Salt Lake City down
Mhm.
to Provo, Utah. Provo,
Okay.
Utah has been the location for many, many videos that are on.
Interesting. That's incredible. So in this time frame, so how long ago was that sighting that you had from the bridge? How many years ago was that?
I think now it must have been about 5 years ago,
Okay. And
something
so
like that, maybe six.
okay. So in that time frame from your first initial, 8 or 9-year-old boy going, "Wow, that could be a Bigfoot. Oh my gosh," to, "Oh my gosh, I think I actually saw a Bigfoot." What was the next step for you? How did you attach yourself to this subject, and what did you do after that?
Well, I became very curious about it. I'd seen the Rocky Mountain Sasquatch organization's videos and I started following them. And then I wondered how much more information like this was out there. And it
Right.
doesn't take long being on YouTube to see there's quite a few videos out there. Most of them are not of the highest quality, but there's
Right.
enough. There's enough that are, that I think any person who would spend just an evening looking up videos on YouTube would probably end up at least open minded to the idea that something like a Bigfoot could exist. And the biggest misunderstanding that I encounter is people think Bigfoot is just one guy, right? There's one who he's the hide and seek master, and people like to joke about it, put it on t-shirts, but
Right.
that's not what people are claiming. It's claimed that this is a species. And of
Right.
course, your listeners may know that there are a lot of different theories on what it might be, from a North American great ape to a
Right.
spiritual being to a Neanderthal type pre-hominid. There's a lot of
Right.
a relic hominid. There's a lot of theories. And me personally, I have heard such a diversity of sightings that I don't subscribe to any one of those theories more than another. I would say I used to be firmly in the account of it being the North American great ape, and that still would be most likely. But where I am now in southern Utah, like I did an interview like this yesterday, actually, with another channel called "Don't Whistle in the Dark," I believe it was called, and
Yeah.
it's a Navajo based podcast. And down
Mm.
here we have right up the road from me, 10 miles up the road, is the Shivwits Paiute Band's
Mhm.
reservation. And then just down south of here, of course, you're in Navajo country.
Mhm.
And they have their own beliefs, ranging from it's another type of human to another type of human with spiritual abilities to
Right.
something different realms of existence. And I'm not going to disregard any of that because evidence for a wide variety of belief.
Right. And this is still such a wide subject. There's still a lot of details that are very fascinating from very diverse ranges of people and just locations. There's information that's phenomenally different. So can you spend a moment and talk with us about some of the evidence that you've had reviewed by peer groups and what the reaction is?
Yes. Um, well, I had another sighting that I haven't captured any of my sightings on camera.
Okay.
Um, the other sighting I had before I get into the evidence was a little bit more up close and personal. I
Okay.
was in I was in a very beautiful place called Gold Bar, Washington,
Hmm.
and I was specifically out looking for Sasquatch. So I did research on areas in Washington that had a large number of sightings, and I went to quite a few of those places. And one of them was this Gold Bar, Washington area. And if I remember correctly, it was near the Snoqualmie Pass. So it's up high altitude,
Sure.
beautiful woodlands. And I went down a logging road and ended up going down this logging road. I'm on foot, and something threw a rock into the trail in front of me. And I saw the rock hit the ground, and I saw it kind of skip towards me. So I knew it wasn't just a pine cone falling straight
Right.
down. So I picked it up, and I'm aware of the fact that there's been reports of Bigfoot's throwing rocks. So I pick up the rock and I'm looking, and, up there in the Pacific Northwest, it can be very difficult to see into. They're very dense.
Yes.
But as I'm looking, I can see maybe 45 feet away in the woods this kind of a shadowy shape.
Okay.
And I see it, and it's not moving. And I'm not sure if that's what threw the rock at me or what. But my first thought is there's a man over there in the woods.
Right.
But I'm also kind of like before, I'm thinking, yeah, it's probably not a man. It's probably a Sasquatch.
Right.
So I grew up throwing baseball, and I can throw playing baseball, and I can throw pretty well. So as
Right.
soon as I stood up with that rock, I immediately reared back and I threw it like a pitcher. And
Okay.
it hit this thing square in the chest. And when I hit it, it didn't make a sound, as far as like the being didn't
Okay.
exclaim anything. It didn't, growl or grunt or vocalize. But what it
Okay.
did was it fell to the ground, and it caught itself kind of in a push-up position. And in two quick sideways movements, it covered about 30 feet and was gone. And when that happened, I dropped all desire to get any evidence. I just, I tell people I screamed like a little girl, and I ran. I booked it.
Tom, oh my gosh.
I'm gone. I'm up that trail, and I was terrified
Wow.
because, yeah, your brain, your rational mind, when things like this happen, tries to think it's a man, it's a guy in the woods, but then the real rational part of your mind goes, there's nobody else out here. You didn't see any vehicles. You haven't seen another person all day long. You're in a Bigfoot area, and you know that it's not a man. And when it hits the ground and does something like that a man cannot do, and that movement, I don't think there's a human on the planet that could have done it. I mean, covering 25 feet in a sideways leap from a push-up.
Right.
I ran. I was terrified. But
Well,
as far as
but to be fair, again, for people who aren't familiar with forest type areas, stepping back for just a second, when he talked about not being able to see into the forest, that there's an old expression that some of you may not have heard. You can't see the forest for the trees. And it literally is that. There are parts of Oregon and Washington where the trees are so close together that you cannot see miles. You can see feet in front of you, and that's it. It's like a dense fog of trees. And so you cannot run in a straight line any direction, forward, sideways, or backwards. There's no space. Everything is very populated with foliage, trees, shrubs, rocks, everything. And so to be able to, number one, hit it and watch that motion happening, that would be crippling. I mean, that's the shock in your brain. Because first of all, when you're in a public area, you hear common sounds. You hear people breathing, stepping. When you're in the forest, you hear crunching and snapping and popping of everything underfoot as you're walking through. And so not hearing any normal other human sounds around you, of course, which you said is a perfect explanation. Your subconscious brain and your logic kicks in and says, no one else is here but me. I would have heard them. I would have seen them. My senses are not picking up anything human around me. And what I just saw was real. I know what I saw, but wow, what the hell did I just see? It's a lot to process. So yeah. I get wanting to take off.
And I've got like, I've never had it tested, but I've got really, really good eyesight. Like I'm one of those people that, you know, like me and my wife were laying in bed and I joked, I was saying like, oh, look at this fancy fan we've got, a Hampton Bay fan. And she was like, where are you reading that? I'm like, it's on the plaque on the side of the fan. She goes, I don't even see the plaque. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can read it from here, you know, 15 feet away. Like I have really good eyesight. And in that environment, everything, like you said, is so vibrantly alive. And it's that color of green that almost seems like it glows, and it's really hard to break one thing from another in your eyes because there's no clear, solid, hard angles. And
but
I wish I'd got a better look, but it was close enough.
Honestly, it's a fantastic observation and experience, and I love the fact that this is yet another incident where I don't know that you intended to hit it, but you wanted to at least throw it back. And so
no, I wanted to hit it. For sure.
Okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure. Yeah. Okay. So even clarifying that it didn't come at you directly. The fact that it shot off to the side in a very peculiar and unusual way, that would be startling, number one. And then again, going back to your brain's already figured out, this is not a cow. This is not a goat. This is not a dog. This is not a person. This is a something, and it's massive. And now you've got visual evidence and cues, and your brain is sorting all this out going, no, this is not anything but something like a Bigfoot. So I'm seeing something very unusual, very strange. Yes. So how long after that did you pursue more research? What happened to you after that? How did you feel?
I've stayed interested ever since then. I had a really cool experience of I was playing music. When I say playing, I mean playing music. I was playing music in Salt Lake City, Utah,
right?
At a Comic-Con event, and I decided before I left I wasn't very interested. I'm not like a video game or comic book kind of guy. I just never was into anything like that. But I figured, here I might as well walk around and take in the experience before I leave.
Sure.
And I'm walking around checking out all the vendors and booths, and I saw this booth, and there was this tall, older, white-haired, white-bearded gentleman behind the booth, and he had a banner that had all these words written on it, and I could tell by looking at the words that they were native words.
Sure.
And not all the same native language, but I could tell that we have so many things in America that are named after various native words that I could tell by looking at there were some native words. And the older gentleman looked really bored. He had nobody at his booth, and he had a table laid out. And I looked over at it closer, and I was like, oh, those are plaster Sasquatch cast.
Oh,
and I went over there, and the guy introduced himself, and it was Dr. Jeff Meldrum.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh.
Huge in the Bigfoot world, you know?
Right.
And I was like, oh, my gosh, yeah, I've seen you on documentaries. And he was so nice and so happy to speak to me. Like I say, he didn't have much. The place that he was at, it wasn't really the right crowd for Bigfoot evidence. They were there for like Lord of the Rings, and it was Comic-Con.
Right.
And but I was super into his table. And he said, these are all different native words, coast to coast, for the phenomena commonly called Sasquatch. And he like showed me the footprints, and he showed me what dermal ridges are. In other words, the fine lines that
Yeah.
are on mammals' hands and feet, which are
Right.
very difficult to fake. And we sat there and talked for a good hour, and I thanked him for his time. And on another occasion, I made a trip into Idaho to go play music, and I was going through a town called Pocatello, Idaho.
Okay.
And I remembered that that's where the university that Dr. Jeff Meldrum works at is located. And I kind of went for a bold move. I looked up their what do you call it? The school roster, the employee list online. And sure enough, Dr. Jeff Meldrum's name and a number were there. And I called, and he answered the phone.
Oh, wow.
And I said, this is Tom Bennett. I met you at the Comic-Con, last year. I'm going to be coming through Pocatello. And I remember you saying you had a lab. I would love to stop by and see it if I may. And he was like, of course. Like, when are you going to be here? And I was like, in about an hour. And the truth was, I was really right outside the school already, but I didn't want to be like super creeper,
Right.
So I was like, in about an hour. And he's like, all right, well, class lets out, about an hour and a half. If you want to meet me, I'll show you around. So I went up there, and he spent 2 hours with me, and he showed me his huge collection of evidence and explained why he felt that each piece was substantial, real evidence. And it was such a cool encounter. And we've met up a few times since then. He let me interview him for my YouTube channel, and just such a nice guy that when you have a genuine interest in this subject matter and have a relatively discerning, critical mind, he was so happy to show me the information. And it really encouraged me to want to learn more. And so I have gone out and found evidence. My two biggest pieces of evidence was in Provo Canyon. I had played a show at a bar, so I didn't get out of there till about 1 in the morning. I had purchased before the show a bag of bananas and a bag of apples. I went up to this Provo Canyon, this Bigfoot sighting hotspot, and parked my vehicle, walked a little ways into the woods, set out my apples and bananas in the perimeter, and did a little bit of your stereotypical Bigfoot calls, which I don't do that anymore when I go in the woods, because I've heard enough encounters that it could be taken as being aggressive.
Yeah.
And you do better they know you're there. So just chill out and look for evidence. Don't wood knock, don't call.
Right.
Like I said, I've done all that, but I don't think it's necessary. These things are smart enough to know when you're there. So, but on this particular time, this was a number of years ago, I did the calls and some wood knocks and had the fruit laid out, and stayed up late until I couldn't take it anymore, fell asleep, got up in the morning, looked around, nothing was disturbed. The fruit was all still there. And what I do when I'm trying to get out in the woods for evidence like this is I follow game trails.
Right.
So I'm looking around, and I see a slight disturbance in the underbrush. I'm like, okay, that's a deer trail. I'm gonna follow that. Also, if you follow the deer trail, that's where the prey animals are going. So the predators are going to follow that as well. And also it makes you much less likely to get lost. If you stay on that game trail, you came in this way, and all you got to do is turn around and go back out.
That's very smart.
That's a huge problem. You get lost in these woods, and I don't want to be one of them. I don't want to end up on 411 with David Politis,
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
And I always go armed as well. Anyway, I followed this game trail for quite a ways, and I started noticing that it was running perpendicular to a established campground. And then I noticed that there were interwoven sticks of various sizes, from quite large down to little tiny sticks, that ran parallel to this campground. And it wasn't like structures like you see some people post where it's like a temporary blind. This was a whole and it was probably 7, 8 feet tall, and it
Okay.
ran probably 100 yards, and it zigzagged behind this campsite, and it had
Okay.
numerous openings where something could look through. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, well, I've heard about Bigfoot's building structures. Of course, there's always the potential that it was built by a person,
Sure.
but this was a major undertaking. This was,
Okay.
like I said, 100 yards roughly of this winding structure. So I came out from behind it and I walked into the campground and I turned and looked at it. And from the opposite side, I couldn't even see it. It was just like it was invisible. So I turned and
Wow.
I went back to the game trail and I'm like, okay, this is very interesting and was certainly built to create a blind by which the
Right.
camper could be watched.
Right.
So I continued up the game trail and I eventually encountered a small stream that would fork off. It went from one body into two streams.
Okay.
And there was, I don't remember what kind of plant, but some kind of bulb flowering plant.
Okay.
And something had pulled up a number of them. And that alone, again, not very compelling. But I found one that something, it was very clear that, like, let's say this was the bulbing plant.
Okay.
Something had come down with an open hand. You could see the finger marks where it had scooped it up in its fingers and pulled the plant out of the ground.
Interesting.
And every finger mark was there. And I'm not a big guy. I'm only 5'6",
Okay.
but it made my hand like, I mean, it was more than twice my hand.
Right.
And so I found that and I thought, well, that's really interesting. So I took a photo of it. I got up and I always, as I always do, especially when I'm out looking for Bigfoot, but anytime in the woods, I got up, took a good look and listened to my surroundings. There, I don't hear or see anything. So I continue. And then I found a hand size tuft of coarse red hair. And this hair was very thick,
Okay.
very um, for the sake of description and not to sound coarse by any means, but the only thing I would compare it to would be very long pubes. It
Okay.
was it was 5, 6 inches long,
Okay.
each individual hair,
Right.
and a tuft about probably about 6 inches by about 6 inches. Just a big red mat of hair, and I
Okay.
picked it up. I should have bagged it and sent it off to Dr. Meldrum for DNA analysis, but I didn't have any bags with me. I picked it up and took a bunch of pictures of it, and I was going to take it with me, but I ended up just leaving it behind. But I got good photos of it, and I continued up the mountain. I didn't see any other evidence, but I did a search of all the animals that live in the area, and the only one that is red is a red fox. And this was certainly not red fox fur.
Hmm.
It
Okay.
looked like a orangutan hair, like an actual
Interesting.
orangutan.
Yeah. Interesting. So, have you been able to do any footprint discoveries? Have you had any opportunity to make a casting of anything like that, or has that been part of what your research involves?
I have not found anything good enough to cast, but
Okay.
I found quite a few footprints that I think were kind of compelling enough. I had some tracks that were reported to me
Mhm.
through our Southern Utah Bigfoot Association Facebook page that looked really good. Right here in St. George, at a popular park that overlooks the city that gets hundreds of visitors a day, somebody found a bare footprint, a human bare footprint with toes that were splayed out really wide and abnormally long. And the
Okay.
guy took a picture with his foot in the picture. And he
Uh-huh.
says, I am I think he said he was 6'5". And he said he wore a size 13 or something like that.
Okay.
And it dwarfed his foot by a good 4 or 5 inches.
Wow.
And he drew where he had found it, And I went up there, but I was out of town, so I didn't get to make it till about 2 or 3 days later. And by this
Right.
point, the tracks had been trampled by all the visitors. But
Of
I had
course.
his photograph, and when I compared it to a size 13 shoe, I was able to determine, I think it would have made them about 18 inches long by about 6 inches wide.
That's
And
phenomenal.
about 2 weeks later, about 20 miles away, going from a desert environment into a wooded environment,
Mhm.
a little area called Pinto, Utah.
Okay.
Uh, a man messaged me that he had found tracks in the snow all around his cabin, and I had him go out and measure them, and they exactly matched the one that's found in the
Wow. That's
same
incredible.
exact dimensions down to the millimeter.
Wow.
And his were clear. I personally, I was going to I was going from St. George, Utah to Ely, Nevada to go play a show out in the Great Basin,
Mhm.
which is high desert, but also gets pretty wooded and mountainous.
Right.
And I came over a high peak in the road. It's called Connors Summit. If I
Mhm.
remember correctly, it sits about 7,200 feet.
Mhm.
So pretty high. Not as high as some of our mountain peaks in Utah. I
Sure.
think we go up to 14,000 feet, I think,
Right.
with the most common mountains being around 10,000. So this was about 7,200. So
Mhm.
good high point, very wooded. Um, so I'm going up over that ridge, and this is an extremely low population, middle of the woods area. Your closest town is Ely, Nevada, which is very small, and it
Mhm.
was still about probably about 30 or 40 minutes away directly through the woods. So I'm
Mhm.
driving up over this Connors Summit, Connors Pass, and I look over from my vehicle and I saw footprints going off in the snow at the high part of the pass.
Mhm.
And I thought, those look strange. I pulled over, I got out, and the first few that I found had been exposed to sunlight, and they had the right dimensions,
Mhm.
and they were about mm, probably about 4.5 to 5 feet apart. If I stepped as far as I could, almost going into a split, I could get
Mhm.
1 foot into the next one. So
Wow.
probably around 4.5 to 5 feet.
Mhm.
The snow there was about a little over knee deep. And I remember thinking, all right, I'm going to film these and I'm going to show myself stepping from one to the next to show how far they are,
Right.
which even if it would have been a very tall man, it was just a little bit too far to be walking.
Right.
And you can hear me in the video saying, I'm going to follow these up into the woods. And my hope is when I get up into the tree line, they'll be less degraded by the sun.
Right.
And I get into the tree line and you could make out every individual toe. You
Wow.
could even pick out the dermal ridges. And these were in snow, but
Right.
they were crystal clear tracks. And I threw them up on YouTube. I sent them to Watch America, Rocky Mountain Sasquatch, Dr. Jeff Meldrum. I sent them to 4 or 5 different reputable Sasquatch researchers, and all of them, like those are those are definitely Bigfoot tracks. And I agree.
Yeah. So, what are you most curious about these days? What are you looking for? Is there any goal that you have specific in your research, or is it just wide and diverse? You just want a little bit of everything that you're researching? What are you looking at these days?
I'm just really, I just really believe there's a lot more to life um, than what meets the eye. I believe that there's creatures that we don't know about. I believe there's a spiritual realm. All of this interests me. I study religion and philosophy and all these things. I think it's all very important. Bigfoot definitely is up at the top of my interests as far as paranormal things go. But I also recently have been seeing a lot of these plasmoid, these energy orbs in the sky,
Mhm.
and I've got some really, really good, clear video of them. Um, and just a week and 2 days ago, 9 days ago, I was just at the barber getting a haircut. My barber goes, "Oh, I got to show you this Bigfoot video that my friend filmed."
Mhm.
I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to see it." And he goes, "Yeah, it was filmed 10 minutes down the road on this certain mountain range. And he
Right.
gets out his camera and he shows me a perfectly crystal clear Bigfoot video. I mean,
Oh,
it's
wow.
kind of far away, but you can make out the robustness of its body, the height, the
Okay.
extra hair on the forearms. He said, yeah, my friend had a dog with him, and the dog had on a subsonic GPS dog collar that
Okay.
would beep in a way that we can't hear.
Mhm.
And you see the Bigfoot in the video put its arms up over, or its hands up over its hands like that and walk away all frustrated.
Oh,
It's incredible. He told me that it was filmed by a local Paiute man, and his friend said you can show it to people, but don't give it to them. And
right.
I told him, like, please go back and tell your friend, like, some researchers want to have this analyzed. So I
Right.
got to follow up with him, and I hope the guy will allow it because I really want to send it to one of my favorite channels. I got a lot of YouTube channels that I really like for Bigfoot things, but one of the best, in my opinion, is Thinker Thunker.
Okay. I don't think I've seen that. I'll have to
So
check it out.
if you're not familiar with Thinker Thunker, he's very intelligent, and he has developed what he calls proportional DNA. So
Okay.
he took the Patterson Gimlin video from 1967,
Mhm.
and he scanned her into a computer, and he documents the ratios of her body. So
Okay.
the length of her arm, the length
Okay.
from her neck to her waist, and the
Okay.
length from the waist to the ground. And he shows that a Sasquatch has different proportions than a human being.
Right.
All human beings, the longest part of our body is our legs. And then
Mhm.
our torso is only about 70% of what our legs are. And then
Right.
our arms are relative to our torso. A Bigfoot, the legs and torso and arms are all equal in percentages, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
So their legs are shorter than ours in proportion to
Right.
their torso and their arms, which gives them a different walk. They'll lift their
Right.
feet higher behind them when they walk, that
Right.
famous Patterson Gimlin walk. So, anyway, what he does is people will send him videos and he will analyze the audio and compare it to known creatures on an electrospectrum so he can see what the audio looks like
Okay.
and compare that with other purported Bigfoot calls.
Mhm.
That all the supposed Bigfoot sounds look the same on a spectrum.
Mhm.
And coyotes don't look like that. Humans
Right.
don't look like that. Our sounds are
Right.
different than theirs. So he can show that scientifically. And he can also take a piece of footage, even if it's not very good, if he can identify where the arms and legs stop and start and the
Right.
torso, he can compare it to that proportional DNA or pDNA and show you whether or not it's a valid Bigfoot video or not. And I'm
Interesting.
just from seeing his videos, I can already tell the proportions on this are 100% correct.
That sounds incredible. I'll have to check that out.
This video that this guy filmed here in southern Utah about a month ago, I would definitely put in the top 10 of best Bigfoot videos ever made.
That's incredible. Can
And
you
it's
take a
just
minute
right
and
there.
just okay. Can you take a minute and talk to us a little bit about the plasmoids and talk to us about I hadn't heard that terminology before until you mentioned it, and just share for the listeners and viewers what that is and what you've discovered?
Okay. So to keep it brief, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I was out in the middle of the desert on the border of Utah and Arizona, and I know the area very well. And I was near Lake Powell, and I was camping out, and I noticed that there was this light just flashing in the sky rhythmically. And I looked at it, and I could see it was light pink and baby blue, pink,
Mhm.
blue, pink, blue. But it wasn't a point of light. It was a entire triangular shaped object. So I got
Okay.
out my phone, I zoomed in on it, I watched it for over an hour until I fell asleep. And then when I woke up the next day, my suspicions were confirmed. There was no radio towers there. There's nothing in the sky there. It wasn't a flight path. It was just open desert. So
Okay.
that was interesting to me. And I thought, wow, I just saw a UFO. So about, I keep saying 8 months ago, but now that I think about it a little bit more, I think it was around a year ago. I was in Laverkin, Utah, and I used to live over there. And that's 22 miles from Zion National Park. And I couldn't sleep. And I got up in the middle of the night and I went outside and I saw this light at about the level of a low level plane. And it was just a white light, but then it pulsed blue. It looked like a ball and it just came straight ahead. But it had a sense, it had a quality to its flight where it wasn't like in a direct flight path. It was just kind of lightly moving back and forth. You know what I mean? But still going relatively towards me. And I'm watching it, and right away I'm thinking, what in the world is this? So I got out my phone, I zoom in on it, and it's flashing blue and white. And when I zoomed in on it, it looked like a cell. It had a nucleus and a wall. And when it pulsed, it looked like it had like a cellophane quality to it, like plasma. It wasn't just one bright, like digital light. It had a very warm, organic quality to it. So after I saw and filmed that, I put it on the internet. People shared it a little bit, and I started looking into what might this have been. And I eventually find through just Google searching that people are calling these things plasmoids.
Okay.
And they're being filmed at that point a lot in New Jersey and on the East Coast and in clusters.
Right.
And I start reading about it, and plasmoids have been documented by NASA. They've been created in a lab from the 1950s up till today. What they are, in a nutshell, is energy trapped within a magnetic field. Now, when they're found naturally, not in the lab, the question that everyone has is, where do they come from? Because they've been filmed by NASA in space, seemingly attracted to space shuttles with astronauts on them. And are they intelligent, living, sentient beings? Because they've been seen to pursue each other. So I saw the one in Laverkin, Utah, and then about 2 weeks ago, my wife and I were sitting in our backyard right here in St. George, Utah. We live kind of on the edge of town. There's only maybe another mile of town beyond us, and then it's Shivwitz Paiute Native Reservation, and then it's open desert all the way 2 hours to Las Vegas.
Okay.
Of course, Area 51's out there. So we saw this thing come flying out of the distance over our house at a low rate of speed, flashing colors, and I filmed it, and I got a really good video of it. And it's same thing, looks like a cell. It's got a nucleus, a little space, and then a wall around it, and the whole thing is just lighting up, blue and white, and kind of a purple shade. We filmed it for a good, 5-10 seconds, and then it went over downtown St. George, and I shared it on the St. George word of mouth, and 5 or 6 other people were like, yeah, we saw it too. Wondered if it was a drone or what it was. I'm like, well, I zoomed in close enough that you can tell it's not a drone. So what are they? I don't know.
That's incredible, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real phenomenon. People are filming them all over. There's no question of whether or not it's real. The question is what.
So can you go back and discuss what you shared at the opening a little bit about stuff going on at your house?
Yeah. So we are renting a home in St. George, and the first day we lived here, I think my wife was putting some kind of like fiber powder into coffee or something, and like maybe a light dusting of it got on the white countertop, and she didn't notice it, so it remained there. And later on, I walked in the kitchen, and I noticed this white powder on the counter, and I knew what it was because we put that in our drinks. And I looked at it, and it looked like somebody had taken their finger and wrote A-L, owl, in the powder. And I thought, well, that's strange. But at first, I don't associate it with anything paranormal.
Sure.
So I called my wife in the room. I said, hey, did you spill protein powder, fiber powder over here? And she goes, oh, I might have. Yeah. Okay. Did you write owl in it? She said, owl? No, I didn't write anything in it. I would have cleaned it up if I knew it was there. I said, come here and look at this. and it said owl in it. And then a few minutes later, we got a message that we were going to get our first visitors to our house, a man named Al and his wife. And we're just like, that's odd. So I got a piece of paper and I wrote down the date. Well, here, I got the paper right.
Okay. Okay.
I wrote down the date. Yeah, here we go. And just to kill some time, not to waste time, but to be quicker with it.
Mhm.
So at first, I just wrote knocks in the night, sink turned on by itself. Italian seasoning jumped out of the cabinet. So I opened the cabinet that's right here, and a bottle of seasoning leaped like 3 feet out of the cabinet. And then powder that said owl on the counter. So I wrote all this down in the first like 2 days of living here.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And then I wrote down on 8/21, so August 21st, a series of knocks at 6:48 a.m. It's knocks.
Mhm.
And then 8/27, so 6 days later, 5 knocks at 3:17 a.m.
Okay.
August 28th, very next day, 1:17 a.m. in the morning, heard a man's voice go, oh, just one time. But that's what we call my daughter.
Okay.
So we're like, okay, now you're saying my daughter's name?
Right.
September 14th, TV turns on by itself. Knock on the door, heard the screen door open the wooden door, no one is there. October 8th, knocks in the night. October 24th, fire alarm goes off on its own. But then I scratched that one off because we realized it was because we have sensitive fire alarms here and they go off very easily. So that one we acknowledged that.
Okay. So you debunked that one. Okay.
Debunked that one. November 2nd, more knocks. November 2nd, door to the garage locked on its own at 10:40 p.m. November 6th, same as above. November 6th, TV turned off on its own. Garage door locked on our wedding day. So that happened. We got married in November and the garage door locked. My mom was here for the wedding and said something pulled on her while she slept. November 19th, TV paused on its own. November 27th, TV paused on its own. 28th, paused on its own. November 28th, same day, 5 knocks at 4:28 a.m. On January 23rd, my wife was home alone and was looking at the bedroom closet door, and it opened right in front of her. After this, we just stopped writing things down. And I ended up blessing the home that if there was anything evil, that it would have to depart from our home, that it wasn't welcome. Right. And my wife had something pop in her mind one day, and she remembered the landlord mentioning her father, and her father lived here, and we found out what his name was, and we did a Google search and found his obituary, and he died in the bedroom with his family with him. Okay. So he died in the room that we now stay in.
Right.
So we've never felt that it's anything evil.
Right.
But it happens all the time. And then it stopped. After I blessed the home, it stopped for a long time. And then just last night, I got up 3 times in the night because I heard what sounded like, we have an exercise room, and it sounded like somebody was like patting on a yoga mat. And I got up and I looked all around, and I'm like, yep, here we go again.
So speaking as a medium, I will just say that chances are it never was anything really evil or negative. Most of the time when spirits are contacting you, it's their playtime. They don't sleep per se. They do rest, but they just want to be acknowledged. And so if you have any interest in doing this, it's up to you. But you can actually find ways to just acknowledge the spirit and just say, you know, we just want you to know when from these hours, from like 11 to 7 in the morning, whatever your sleep time is, if you really want us to acknowledge you, that's fine. But please do it when we're awake. When we're sleeping, you know, you probably haven't thought about this in a while, but we really value our sleep. It's really important that we have quiet.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you really want us to pay attention to you or to do something, you know, we'll give you a chance to do that. You know, we can leave something out here and you can let us know that you're here. You know, we really appreciate this house. We're really glad to be here.
Mhm.
And approach it from that way, to live hospitably with each other, so to speak.
Right. I think that's good advice. Yeah.
Well, because one of the things, especially with him messing with your, was it your mom or your mother-in-law that said she felt
Yeah.
like she'd been pulled
My
on?
mom.
Okay. So they don't always think about what it's like on our end to be messed with.
Mhm.
When I first moved into the house we're in now with my husband, we actually had a very sneaky and snotty poltergeist that kept leaving thumbtacks under our sheets.
Oh, yeah.
And my husband is blind. And so
Oh,
I have to watch out for stuff all the time. And there's no way I am a meticulous packer. There's no way that my office supplies wound up with my sheets. Not
sure.
happen. And so when a push pin is sitting straight up and down facing the ceiling 3 nights in a row, that's not a coincidence. And
No.
so I finally had a talk with this spirit, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to hear them. It was the husband of the lady who sold us the house, and he said she was miserable after moving out and wished she hadn't sold the house. She had
Oh,
regrets. And so I had a talk with him, and I just said, "Look, she wanted to live by the lake. She got this beautiful home. She's happy there. Let's reassess your opinion here. Let's go back and think about this. What are you trying to accomplish? If you want me to acknowledge you, I'm happy to do that. But my husband's blind and diabetic, and you possibly poking him could cause him to get an infection and really be harmful to him." And
yeah.
I felt regret from him, and I said, "Don't ever do that again."
Mm.
You know,
Yeah,
and
that's really cool.
he's never done anything like that since. But there's him and 2 other guys that hang out around here, and they get tired of watching certain programs. So once in a while, they'll ask to see something specific. You know, one of them is a John Wayne fan. Another one likes, buddy cop shows from the 80s, or, Miami Vice type stuff, or, just 80s action films kind of stuff. They're all different. And so this guy, if he died there, it doesn't mean he has any unfinished business necessarily. He may just be stopping in to kind of look at the house and see how everything's going. He clearly
Right.
likes you guys because he's not being destructive or
No,
angry.
no.
It sounds more like he's a prankster, like he just likes joking around or getting acknowledged, just
Mm.
getting told. So if you know his name, you can say hi, and we appreciate you being here, but please, we got to have our sleep time, and no scaring the daughter ever. Not okay.
Yeah, yeah, we'll
You
do
know.
that. I like that. It's a good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. But most of the time spirits are not malicious. They're just hanging out,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I believe that for sure. I've I've got a bunch of religious books over here in the cabinet, and one of them I was reading that really kind of opened my eyes to things was one of the uh, one of the men that was kind of prominent in the history of Utah was Brigham Young, and he gave a whole sermon. He said the spirit world is right here. Anyone
Mhm.
that ever lived, ever died, they're still right here until the resurrection day. And you have to remember that at any given point, you're surrounded by spirits.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all over, definitely. Well, and that's, I think, one of the best things I've heard. A friend of mine is a scientist, and she likes to remind me, energy never dies.
Yes.
It does not cease to exist. So it has to be somewhere,
Yep.
regardless of what you think happens when the body dies. The thing that makes us who we are does not. So it's got to go somewhere, and it still has thoughts and feelings. And so I think it's important to acknowledge spirits and just be kind, and they'll be kind in turn. So is there anything that you're particularly proud of that you have done so far in your Bigfoot research?
Oh no, I wouldn't say there's anything I'm particularly proud of, but I just think it's I think that so I bring it up at my concerts. I'll say, hey, I'm taking a break in a few minutes. If anybody's got a Bigfoot story they want to come up and tell me, please do so. And more often than not, somebody will come up and tell me an experience. I just encourage people, if you've had an experience of this nature, whether it's one paranormal thing or another, like you were saying at the beginning, like there's places to share these stories. It feels good to do that, to be heard. It also helps other people who experience similar things to feel like there's validation there, that they're not crazy. I know that when I ask about Bigfoot experiences, a lot of times somebody will come up and tell me about their experiences, and I love hearing about it. Places that collect these stories, we love hearing these things. So look in your local area. There's probably a Facebook group, YouTube channels, things of that nature. This podcast, many great podcasts. Tell your stories.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Tom, because that's my goal. I really want people to feel safe. We all have seen something or heard something, or we've got a family story that's been shared, or a neighbor, and you're not going to the funny farm for talking about it anymore. You're allowed to speak your mind and share your story. And I think it's another thing that connects us as people, regardless of where we grew up or what we're used to. Sometimes there's things we just can't explain completely. And it's nice to feel safe to just talk about it. Just share. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you notice?
You don't have to have all the answers either.
Correct.
Like so many people think they gotta Bigfoot is exactly this. It's like, we don't really know, but we do know that people are having experiences, and it's great to hear.
Exactly. Well, if someone would like to get a hold of you, Tom, what is your preferred form of contact, or how would you like people to follow you on social media?
Well, I've got social media for Southern Utah Bigfoot Association, but I'm not as active on it as I ought to be.
Okay.
But we do have a YouTube channel, a Facebook, and an Instagram for Southern Utah Bigfoot Association.
Okay.
And then I'm really good at getting my emails answered. My personal email, where I can always be reached, is sweet, SWEET, salt, SALT, record, RACORDS @gmail.com.
Okay.
And I love hearing people's stories. More than people can reach out to me and share with whatever they want to, and especially if they're in Utah, Idaho, Arizona, Nevada, or Wyoming, areas that I often travel to. I'd love to hear.
That's great. I want to thank you again for coming on today and sharing your stories with me, Tom. I really appreciate everything that you shared. And I love that you have a variety of stories, because that's fun to me, because that means you're open to more things. And the plasma stuff is mind-blowing to me. I've never heard that terminology before. I've seen some glowing lights before, and orbs in different situations. All of it's fascinating. I love the paranormal. I think it's proof that we're in a magical place, and we need to just keep our eyes and ears open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is Holly from Holly's Pandorium and Tom Bennett. And we're very glad that you came in today. Please, if you would, hit the like button, hit subscribe, share with your friends so you can reach more contact like this, and so our content can get out to other people. And if you're interested in reaching Tom, please find him on his YouTube page or on Facebook. Thank you so much again. This is Holly saying thank you for stopping by, and we'll see you again soon.